Right now, what's ahead of us isn't just a downturn, it's a fundamental fracture in the world economy. I'm not here to soften it for you, I'm here to embolden you, because when the cracks are deeper than anticipated, that's when true leadership steps up. Welcome, I'm your name, and this is your Zero to CEO warning. Right now, most people are watching the news and telling themselves that everything looks stable. They see the markets fluctuating, inflation numbers ticking down slightly, or jobs still being posted online, and they think, maybe the worst is behind us. But what they're missing are the cracks beneath the surface. Cracks that aren't obvious if you're looking at the world the way the average person does. The truth is, the economy doesn't break in one dramatic collapse out of nowhere. It erodes slowly and then all at once. And unless you're paying attention to the right signals, you'll only realize what's happening when it's already too late. Think about the national debt. It isn't just a number scrolling across a government website. It's a weight that grows heavier with every passing day. Trillions upon trillions borrowed, with no plan to pay it down, only to keep refinancing it at higher interest rates. That's not sustainable. When a family overspends, the credit card company eventually says enough. When a nation overspends, the world reacts in ways that are even more destructive. Currencies lose credibility, investors flee to safer places, and the very system that allowed prosperity for decades starts to fracture. This isn't theory, it's history repeating itself, because every empire that thought it could borrow endlessly eventually learned the same hard lesson. But debt isn't the only crack. Look at the geopolitical landscape. Wars, trade disputes, tariffs, and sanctions. They're not isolated stories. They're signals that the global order is shifting. Supply chains don't just snap back to normal after years of pressure. Trust between nations doesn't heal overnight. And when the flow of goods, energy, and capital gets disrupted, economies weaken from the inside out. That weakness doesn't show up on your Instagram feed or in the headlines designed to keep you calm. It shows up when shelves are empty, when energy costs spike, and when your paycheck doesn't stretch the way it used to. Then there's the monetary system itself. For decades, the world has operated on the assumption that the U.S. dollar will always remain king. That assumption is now being challenged. Quietly but steadily, nations are diversifying away from the dollar. They're building alliances, experimenting with alternative currencies, and preparing for a future where the greenback no longer holds the same power it once did. If that shift accelerates, the consequences will be far more severe than a normal recession. It would strike at the foundation of global finance, and here's the truth. Foundations don't crumble in plain sight. They crack beneath the surface, unnoticed until the collapse feels sudden and overwhelming. Inflation, too, has left scars that people underestimate. Even if the official numbers cool slightly, the damage has already been done. Prices rarely fall back to where they were. Wages don't keep up. The cost of living ratchets higher, permanently adjusting the standard of what people can afford. That's why households are leaning harder on credit cards, draining savings, and working multiple jobs just to stay afloat. These aren't isolated struggles. They're evidence of an economy that looks stable on paper, but is breaking underneath. And here's the part that too many ignore. Leadership at the highest levels is failing to address these cracks. Politicians distract with promises, central banks toggle interest rates like a light switch, and the media reassures the public that everything is under control. But when you strip away the messaging, you're left with the truth. The system is being patched, not repaired. Each patch covers a hole, but it doesn't stop the leaks from spreading. Eventually, the entire structure gives way. Now, why does this matter to you? Because if you're waiting for an announcement on TV to warn you, you'll already be behind. By the time the experts admit there's a crisis, the damage will already be done. This is why awareness is the first step and decisive action is the second. The cracks beneath the surface don't mean panic, but they do mean preparation. The ones who see clearly, who plan ahead, who build resilient systems for themselves and their businesses, Those are the people who not only survive but thrive when the old order breaks down. So take a hard look at the world right now. Don't just accept the headlines at face value. Ask yourself what's happening beneath the surface. Ask where the weak points really are, because history is clear. Societies that ignored the cracks were crushed by them. And societies that faced them head on came out stronger, bolder, and more capable. The difference between those two outcomes comes down to whether you choose to wake up now, or wait until the collapse forces you to. Most people fear the word recession because they think it means job losses, shrinking businesses, and falling markets. But there's something even more dangerous that most don't understand until it's already crushing them. It's not just when the economy slows down, it's when the economy stalls while prices keep climbing. That's stagflation, and it's one of the most brutal economic environments you can live through. Why? Because it hits from both sides. Growth disappears, so opportunity dries up. At the same time, inflation eats away at whatever you've managed to earn or save. It's the nightmare scenario where standing still feels like sinking. Inflation alone is painful, but at least it's usually paired with strong growth. That's what we saw when governments printed money and flooded the system during crises. People complained about rising prices, but businesses were still expanding, jobs were still being created, and demand kept the machine running. In a normal recession, the opposite happens. Prices fall because demand collapses. Painful, yes, but it at least resets the system. Stagflation is neither. It's the toxic combination of both at once. No growth to lift you up, and prices that never stop suffocating you. Think about what that means for the average household. Your paycheck isn't growing, maybe it's even shrinking, but your rent is higher. Groceries cost more every week. Energy bills creep up. The savings you built over years are drained in months because the cost of simply living accelerates faster than you can adapt. It's not just economic pressure, it's psychological warfare on families. People start making desperate choices, skipping health care, cutting nutrition, working themselves into exhaustion just to survive. That's the kind of slow burn that stagflation delivers. Now take it from the business side. A company can usually survive inflation by passing costs on to customers, or a recession by cutting back and waiting for demand to return. But stagflation, that's where strategies collide. Costs are climbing, raw materials, energy, wages. But customers aren't buying because their own wallets are under pressure. Raise prices and you lose them. Keep prices stable and your margins collapse. It's a squeeze that suffocates small businesses first, then spreads to giants. Many companies don't just shrink during stagflation, they disappear. What's driving this threat? It's not one factor, it's a storm of them. Decades of debt accumulation, reckless spending, and artificial interventions created a fragile balance. Supply chains disrupted by geopolitical tensions, wars, and shifting alliances pushed costs higher. Energy shocks added more fuel to the fire, and central banks, trapped between fighting inflation and preventing collapse, toggle interest rates without solving the deeper issues. The result, a system that grinds down productivity while costs rise uncontrollably. That's the definition of stagflation. If you think this is just theoretical, look back to the 1970s. Entire economies were brought to their knees. Energy crises left people waiting in line for gas. Families watched their savings lose value overnight. Businesses folded, unemployment spiked, and yet the cost of living soared. That wasn't just an economic event, it was a generational wound, and here's the warning, the same ingredients are here again. Massive deficits, global instability, energy vulnerabilities, and a monetary system stretched to its limits. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. The most dangerous part about stagflation is how invisible it feels at first. It creeps in slowly, prices rise, but leaders tell you it's temporary. Growth weakens, but they call it transitional. By the time they admit the reality, the damage is already entrenched. Entire industries have shrunk, consumer behavior has shifted, and the middle class has absorbed blows it may never recover from. Stagflation doesn't announce itself with a crash, it suffocates you over time until collapse feels inevitable. And here's the reality: no one is coming to save you from it. Governments will debate, central banks will experiment, but their tools are limited. Printing more money fuels inflation. Cutting spending slows growth even further. Raising interest rates cools prices but kills investment. Every lever they pull has a cost, and in stagflation, the costs outweigh the benefits. That's why leadership from the top often fails in these moments. They don't have answers, only band-aids. So what does that mean for you? It means waiting for someone else to fix it is the fastest path to being crushed. In a stagflationary world, survival belongs to the prepared. That means creating multiple income streams, protecting your savings from erosion, building skills that remain valuable no matter what the economy does. It means thinking like a strategist, not a spectator. The people who adjust early, who anticipate the squeeze, are the ones who come out stronger when everyone else is drowning. The hidden threat isn't just the economic math of stagflation, it's the complacency it feeds on. Most will keep believing everything will normalize, that things will return to the way they were. They'll wait for a turnaround that doesn't come, and when reality sets in, they'll have no time left to adjust. The choice is simple: ignore the warning signs or face them head on and act decisively, because stagflation doesn't forgive the unprepared, it buries them. When you want to understand where the economy really stands, you don't look at government press releases or the carefully crafted speeches of policymakers. You look at the people who are actually in the trenches, those running massive companies, making payroll for tens of thousands of employees, negotiating supply contracts, and watching consumer demand shift in real time. CEOs don't have the luxury of sugarcoating reality. Their survival depends on seeing the truth clearly and acting on it quickly. And what they're seeing right now isn't encouraging. Many of them are quietly admitting something that the average person hasn't yet processed. The economy isn't just slowing, it may already be breaking. When you talk to leaders of major corporations, the tone is cautious, even anxious. They're watching their numbers, and those numbers don't lie. Orders are down, hiring has stalled, expansion plans are being shelved. They're cutting costs not because they want to, but because they see the writing on the wall. A CEO doesn't risk investor confidence by hinting at weakness unless that weakness is undeniable, and yet more and more of them are hinting, or outright saying, that demand is slipping and margins are shrinking. That alone should tell you that the cracks are deeper than most people realize. Here's the reality: CEOs are often the first to feel an economic downturn, because they're the ones who see both sides of the equation. They see supply chains tightening, raw material costs climbing, and consumers pulling back simultaneously. When customers hesitate to buy and costs keep rising, companies are stuck in a vise. That pressure reveals itself long before GDP numbers or job reports catch up. By the time the data confirms it, the CEO have already been living it for months. That's why their anxiety matters. It's not panic, it's foresight. What's even more alarming is how widespread this sentiment is becoming. It's not just one industry or one region. Leaders across sectors, from technology to manufacturing to retail, are signaling the same thing. The outlook is darkening. Some are outright warning their shareholders that growth will be weaker than expected. Others are freezing hiring or laying off workers to brace for impact. These aren't decisions made lightly. They're moves designed to survive a storm that, in their eyes, is already approaching. If you pay attention to their actions instead of official narratives, the picture is clear. There's malaise spreading through the highest levels of corporate leadership. And that malaise isn't only about economics, it's about confidence. CEOs don't just react to numbers, they react to the environment they're operating in. Right now, that environment is filled with uncertainty. Will tariffs spiral into full blown trade wars? Will inflation continue to linger? Will central banks raise rates again and choke investment? None of these questions have reassuring answers. When leaders lack confidence in the future, they make defensive moves. They hoard cash, they shrink operations, they slow down innovation. And when the top slows down, the ripple effect eventually hits everyone below. Remember, corporations are the engines of employment. If CEO are tightening their belts, it means fewer jobs created, slower wage growth, and more layoffs. That anxiety they feel doesn't stay locked in boardrooms. It cascades down to workers, to communities, to families. It's a domino effect. And if the people who are supposed to be the most visionary, the most forward-looking, are struggling to see a clear path ahead, you should ask yourself, what does that mean for everyone else? Another thing to keep in mind is that CEO have access to information most people don't. They see real, time consumer behavior through day to you'll never read about in headlines. They see how supply lines are holding or breaking weeks before it hits the news. They have analysts, strategists, and economists feeding them the sharpest insights available. When they start to worry, it's not because they're guessing. It's because they're staring at facts that haven't yet trickled down to the public. Their anxiety is a signal, and it should be treated as a warning. The danger is that many people dismiss these signals, thinking CEO are just being conservative. But when the most experienced leaders in business, the very people who built empires by betting correctly on markets, start moving defensively, you'd be wise to pay attention. Because their actions reveal a truth few are willing to say out loud. The economy is far weaker than it looks, and what's coming may be worse than what the models predict. This is where leadership separates itself. The average person waits until the headlines scream crisis. The sharp leader reads between the lines, listens to the tone of those who are closest to the action, and positions themselves accordingly. If the CEO of the world are signaling distress, it's not paranoia, it's foresight. The question is, will you ignore it and hope things magically improve? Or will you take it as the early warning system it truly is? Because by the time the numbers confirm what CEO already feel in their bones, it'll be too late to make the easy adjustments. We are living in a moment that will be studied decades from now, a point in time when the old structures of global finance, trade, and power are being tested in ways we haven't seen in generations. The world doesn't shift gradually forever. There are periods where pressure builds, and then suddenly it all snaps. That's where we are today, a juncture of historic proportions where choices made or ignored will shape the course of entire economies, industries, and societies for years to come. Most people won't recognize it until it's in the rearview mirror, but the signs are already flashing red for anyone paying attention. Look at the debt spiral. Nations have piled up obligations so massive that even the interest on that debt now threatens to overwhelm budgets. Governments are stuck in a cycle of borrowing to pay off old borrowing, while promising their citizens everything from entitlement programs to endless spending packages. It's the equivalent of using a new credit card to pay off the old one, hoping no one notices. But the world notices, creditors notice, and history has shown us that no empire, no matter how powerful, escapes the consequences of drowning itself in debt. This moment isn't just another chapter in the cycle. It's the point where the weight of decades of mismanagement collides with reality. At the same time, the geopolitical landscape is fracturing. Old alliances are strained, new blocs are forming, and global trust is evaporating. Trade, which has been the backbone of prosperity for decades, is being weaponized through tariffs, sanctions, and restrictions. Energy is being used as leverage. Supply chains, once considered invincible, have revealed their fragility. These aren't isolated developments. They are signals that the very framework of globalization, something that defined the late 20th and early 21st century, is breaking apart. And when the system that connected the world starts to splinter, The ripple effects are more powerful than any single recession. What makes this juncture historic is the convergence. In the past, crises often came from one direction. A financial crash, a war, an energy shock, but today, we're staring at all of these forces colliding at once, debt at unsustainable levels, inflation that refuses to be tamed, political polarization that paralyzes decision making, wars that disrupt trade routes and energy flows, and underneath it all, a global population that is increasingly losing faith in the very institutions meant to provide stability. That loss of faith is as dangerous as any economic indicator, because once people stop trusting the system, they stop participating in it. This is not a time of small adjustments. This is a time when the rules of the game themselves are being rewritten. Look at the currency system. For decades, the dollar has dominated, and the world has operated under the assumption that it always will. But now, quietly and steadily, nations are seeking alternatives. They are building new trade agreements that bypass the dollar. They are stockpiling gold, experimenting with digital currencies, and preparing for a world where the financial order looks very different. If that shift accelerates, it won't just be a headline. It will be a reset of the global financial architecture. That kind of shift doesn't happen often. When it does, it defines an era. And while all of this unfolds, leadership is lagging. Policymakers argue over short-term fixes while ignoring the structural cracks. Central banks toggle between raising rates and cutting them, hoping to balance inflation with growth. But all they're really doing is playing for time. Time they don't have. Because every delay, every patch, every quick fix only deepens the eventual reckoning. It's like watching water rise behind a dam while the engineers insist the cracks are manageable. Eventually, that dam doesn't just leak, it breaks. Future historians will point to this period and say it was obvious. The debt, the fractures in globalization, the erosion of trust, the weaponization of trade. These are not subtle signals. They're glaring warnings, and yet most people, caught up in daily distractions, will continue to believe that everything is normal until it isn't, until shelves are empty, currencies are questioned, and industries vanish. That's what makes this moment so dangerous. It's not just the presence of risk, it's the complacency toward it. But here's the other side of history. Periods like this, while destructive, also create the greatest opportunities. Because when the old order collapses, the new order is built by those bold enough to step into the chaos. The leaders who prepare now, who adapt before the breaking point, are the ones who will shape what comes next. This juncture of historic proportions doesn't just test societies. It reveals who is ready to lead them into the future. The question is not whether we are at a turning point. The evidence is overwhelming. The real question is, will you watch history happen, or will you position yourself to shape it? Because make no mistake, this isn't just another downturn, another cycle, another news story. This is one of those rare moments when the world takes a sharp turn. And those who are ready won't just survive it. They'll define what comes after. Leadership is never truly tested when things are easy. Anyone can look strong when markets are climbing, when opportunities are everywhere, when the world feels predictable. The real test of leadership comes when uncertainty takes over, when fear spreads faster than confidence, when the future is clouded and every decision carries risk. Right now, we are entering that kind of era, one where hesitation is as dangerous as making the wrong move. And this is where the difference between reactive leaders and proactive leaders becomes undeniable. Reactive leaders wait until the storm hits before they act. Proactive leaders see the storm forming on the horizon, and they start preparing long before the first drop of rain falls. What does proactive leadership look like in times like these? It means refusing to accept surface-level narratives and instead digging into the truth. It means acknowledging the cracks others want to ignore and building systems strong enough to withstand the weight of those cracks widening. It means refusing to sit back and hope someone else will fix the problem, because here's the reality: No one is coming to save you. Governments, central banks, policymakers. They'll promise, they'll delay, they'll patch, but they won't solve. If you're counting on them to rescue you, you've already lost. Proactive leadership means taking ownership of the outcome, no matter how messy the situation. Consider the leaders who wait. They don't cut costs until the business is already bleeding. They don't diversify until their main product line collapses. They don't build cash reserves until the banks stop lending. They don't train their teams for disruption until disruption has already swallowed the industry. These are the ones who are always one step behind, reacting instead of steering. And history is brutal with reactive leaders. They're remembered not for their intentions, but for their failures. Now compare that with the leaders who act early. They study the date others dismiss. They prepare for scenarios others call unlikely. They're willing to take heat for decisions that look overly cautious in the moment, but prove visionary in hindsight. They don't wait for layoffs to become necessary. They strengthen their teams, upgrade their talent, and double down on core strengths when others are cutting corners. They don't hoard cash out of fear. They deploy it strategically into opportunities that only appear when everyone else is retreating. That's proactive leadership, seeing the bigger picture, moving before the crowd, and building resilience while others are paralyzed. There's another key element: communication. In uncertain times, people are desperate for clarity. They don't need to be told everything will be fine. They need to be told the truth. Proactive leaders understand that candor creates trust. They're not afraid to admit challenges, but they pair those challenges with a clear plan of action. When people know their leader is prepared, they stop panicking, and when panic stops, performance improves. That ability to steady the ship, even while navigating through chaos, is what separates those who thrive in crises from those who collapse under them. Proactive leadership is also about seizing the moment. When others retreat, markets open up. When others freeze, talent becomes available. When others complain about uncertainty, proactive leaders recognize it as the ultimate opportunity. Because the truth is, the biggest fortunes, the most transformative companies, and the most iconic leaders in history didn't rise during times of calm. They rose during periods of upheaval. They built when others were too afraid to act. They expanded when everyone else was contracting. They understood that leadership isn't about waiting for perfect conditions. It's about creating progress under imperfect ones. The cost of waiting is invisible until it's too late. Missed opportunities, lost time, broken momentum, all of it adds up. Proactive leaders don't let that cost pile up. They don't get distracted by noise. They focus relentlessly on what they can control, and they make moves today that position them for tomorrow. That doesn't mean reckless risk-taking. It means calculated preparation. It means anticipating, adapting, and advancing, even when the environment is hostile. The world we're entering isn't going to reward the passive. It's going to punish hesitation. Those who cling to the past, who wait for certainty, who hope that conditions will magically improve, they're going to be left behind. But those who act now, who build resilience into their systems, who train themselves and their teams to think bigger and move faster, those are the ones who will not only survive the storm, but will emerge as the architects of what comes next. This is the defining truth. Proactive leadership is power. It's the power to control your destiny when everything around you feels uncontrollable. It's the power to build while others break. It's the power to turn a period of fear into a period of growth. And at a time when the world is being reshaped, the only real question is, will you be one of those leaders who waits, or one of those leaders who creates? Because history has no mercy for the passive. But it never forgets the ones who had the courage to act first. This isn't a rehearsal. The storm isn't coming. It's already stirring. You won't find success by retreating to the sidelines or waiting for direction. Leaders build foundations while others are running, So here's your choice. Wait for things to fall apart, or step into your role today, because true CEO don't flinch when the world shakes. They build. And that's your zero to CEO moment. Let's get to work.